Well, let's go ahead and get started. Carla just be late. All right, Proverbs chapter 11, minus 10 points off her final grade. A false balance is abomination to the Lord, but a just weight is His delight. See, what they used to do back in the ancient times, merchants would buy and sell and trade, and they had weights, and they would use a scale, and they had one set of weights for buying and one set for selling. And of course, they wanted it to work out in their favor each time. If they were selling, they'd have a different scale than if they were buying. They wanted to pay the least amount if they were buying, and they wanted to get the best rate when they were selling. And but God does not like false weights. He does not like injustice. He wants righteousness. He wants fairness. He says, when pride cometh, then cometh shame. But with the lowly is wisdom. To be able to accept instruction, what must a person be? You must be humble. Only the lowly will accept instruction from God. You have to be lowly. That reminds me of the meek of Matthew chapter 5. You must be meek. That was one of the great Beatitudes. The meek will inherit the earth. You must be poor in spirit, because the poor in spirit understand that they're broken, right? They have to have that mindset to accept instruction. The integrity of the upright shall guide them, but the perverseness of transgressors shall destroy them. Riches profit not in the day of wrath, but righteousness delivereth from death. The righteousness of the perfect shall direct his way, but the wicked shall fall by his own wickedness. The righteousness of the upright shall deliver them, but the transgressors shall be taken in their own naughtiness. The riches of the sinful are not going to protect them in the day of judgment. They can't count on that. We talked about that a little bit in the last chapter. A person's wealth will not do them any good in eternity. And when the wicked rely upon their wealth, all they have is this life. And this life isn't what matters. In fact, this life is so temporary, it's almost insignificant. But the righteous will be saved from death as they stand justified in the sight of God. And that's what Romans is all about. We study the book of Romans. How can we stand justified in the sight of God? When the wicked man dieth, his expectation shall perish, and the hope of unjust men perisheth. What kind of hope does the wicked man have? His hope is in this life. If you're not getting it in this life, you're not going to get it. So when he dies, his hope dies with him. And that's what Solomon's talking about here. The hope of unjust men perish. The righteous is delivered out of trouble, and the wicked cometh in his stead. The righteous have hope. The righteous are going to be delivered. I knew a fellow from Texas. I used to when I worked in the body shop for years. I did work for him, and he was a wealthy man. He owned at one time a lot of service stations in the Nashville area. He started out in Texas, owned a lot of them in Texas. But he said he was telling me about a fellow that he knew in Texas that was very wealthy, and he's very greedy and very stingy with his money. And someone said to him one time, he said, you can't take it with you when you die. And he said, no, but I can drag it all the way up to the grave. If that's all the hope you have in this life, that's, you're pitiable, aren't you? You're to be pitied if that's all you have in this life. Yeah. If all we have in this life, and Paul was talking about if there's no judgment, or if there's no resurrection, the Christian of all people are most pitiful, aren't they? Because if all we have in this life, we might as well go out and grab it. But there's more to this life than this physical life. And so that's what we're getting at. A hypocrite with his mouth destroyeth his neighbor, but through knowledge shall the just be delivered. How does a hypocrite with his mouth destroy his neighbor? Usually he does it through lies, doesn't he? He'll slander, he'll lie, he'll talk about his neighbor. But through knowledge shall the just be delivered. If the just behave in such a way, and Peter talked about this, if you're punished or you're persecuted because you did something wrong, that's not anything to be to glory in, right? You shouldn't brag about that. But if you're punished or you're persecuted because of your faith, now that's another story, right? But he said to live in such a way that if people talk about you, your reputation will make them ashamed. So when he talks about, but through knowledge shall the just be delivered, if people know your reputation and they know who you are as a person, though your hypocrite neighbor starts talking about you, everyone else is going to know through knowledge that's not true. Because you live the life of a Christian and you're faithful, and everyone else knows that's not the way it is. So verse 9 really holds a lot of truth to it. When it goeth well with the righteous, the city rejoiceth, and when the wicked perish, there is shouting. Reasonable people know that righteousness is good for society. Reasonable people understand that. Even people who want to live however they want to live understand that righteousness is good for society because we have certain rights, right? We have certain rights. I can do what I want to do without having my rights trampled upon. That's righteousness, Sister Carmen. Righteousness exalts a nation. Exactly, you're right. Righteousness exalts a nation. And what happens when we know a good person that's a faithful, righteous person, and that person passes on? We're sad about that in the physical, aren't we? In the present. But we know that faithful person is in a much better place. But what about when a sorry, no good person who has caused more damage than he ever could do good? What happens when that person leaves this world? No one is mourning that, are they? When Hitler died, when Mussolini died, when all those people died, when terrorists who kill innocent people when they die, are we mourning that? We're not mourning it. We're glad they're gone because innocent people are not going to be subjected to them anymore. And that's what Solomon says here. When the wicked perish, they're shouting. They're shouting. That means there's rejoicing. By the blessing of the upright, the city is exalted, but it is overthrown by the mouth of the wicked. We covered that. He that is void of wisdom despiseth his neighbor, but a man of understanding holdeth his speech. We talked a little bit about that last chapter. The wise person knows when to talk and when to be silent. And you know what to say and when to say it. That's called tact, isn't it? That's called, the word escapes me. I think I put it in your notes if you want to check that out. But anyway, knowing what to say and when to say it is valuable. Knowing when to be silent is valuable. We don't always have to give an answer. Jesus did not always give an answer. When he was taken before Herod, he did not speak a word, did he? What was Herod after? You recall when he stood before Herod? When Jesus stood before Herod. He wanted to see a miracle, didn't he? He was all excited. He wanted to see a magic show. Jesus didn't even speak a word to him. He was silent. So we don't always have to say something. A talebearer revealeth secrets, but he that is of a faithful spirit concealeth the matter. Don't tell your secrets to someone who cannot keep their mouth closed. Be careful who you tell your secrets to. You know how you keep something secret? Don't tell anybody. Never tell anybody. That's how you for sure keep a secret a secret. A faithful spirit concealeth the matter. A person who is a true faithful friend will never tell a secret. Now we're not talking about sin, okay? Let's make that clear here. We're not talking about sin, okay? Sin is to be revealed. Where no counsel is, the people fall, but in the multitude of counselors there is safety. You know what I think about when I hear verse 14 or I read verse 14? I think about young Rehoboam right before the nation of Israel was divided. He would not listen to the counsel of wise men. Instead, he listened to what his young friends told him. Oh, you think my daddy was hard on you? You haven't seen anything yet. I'm going to raise taxes. I'm going to be a lot rougher than he was. You are really going to suffer. Now, what kind of wisdom is in that approach? Well, people aren't going to put up with that just for so long. They put up with it under Solomon for years, but they weren't certainly not going to put up with it under Rehoboam. They didn't feel like they owed any allegiance to Rehoboam, for sure, outside of the tribe of Judah. And so we learn what happened. The nation was divided. Verse 15 is one of the greatest pieces of advice that we're going to have, and we're going to see it several times. He that is surety for a stranger shall smart for it, and he that hateth suretyship is sure. Don't sign a note for a stranger. Don't be a guarantee for anybody, particularly someone you don't know. If you're going to be a guarantee for someone, it better be someone you know and you trust, and they want to pay it back as much as you want them to pay it back. So we talked about that in a couple of chapters ago. That is wise information. A gracious woman retaineth honor, and strong men. What does the New King James say there? Does it say violent men? Ruthless? Okay. The American Standard says violent, so ruthless men retain riches. Nothing better than a gracious woman, a gracious wife. She does retain honor. And so the idea here is that's what we want. That's what all men should desire. The merciful man doeth good to his own soul, but he that is cruel troubleth his own flesh. The wicked worketh a deceitful work, but to him that soweth righteousness shall be a sure reward. As righteousness tendeth to life, so he that pursueth evil pursueth to his own death. Godliness is mercy. Mercy is a blessing. So we ought to extend mercy to people when we have an opportunity to extend mercy, because we want mercy from God. So we ought to extend that same mercy. And because if we're merciful, that's what God will provide for us. Ahab was cruel to Naboth. He didn't extend mercy to him. He lied. He got together a bunch of false witnesses. They testified against Naboth that he blasphemed, and so they murdered the man. But ultimately, it brought death and destruction upon Ahab. That's kind of the straw that broke the camel's back, wasn't it? He was going to pay anyway, but he certainly was going to pay when that happened. They that are of a froward heart are abomination to the Lord, but such as are upright in their way are a delight. Lies and deceit are an abomination to God. Abomination means something that is disgusting, something that God hates. He hates lies and deceit. And of course, the upright are His delight. He loves the upright. Any comments, questions? Though hand join in hand, the wicked shall not be unpunished, but the seed of the righteous shall be delivered. So what if the majority decide that they want to do something that is in opposition to God? If the majority want to do it, surely it's not wrong. Well, that's what Solomon's saying here, right? Though hand join in hand, it doesn't matter if the majority want to do something. If God says it's wrong, right? What about the Tower of Babel? They learned in a hurry that if you're united in a work, boy, you can really get something done in a hurry. But they were doing the wrong thing, and that's why God confounded their language and dispersed them. As a jewel of gold in a swine's snout, so is a fair woman which is without discretion. Well, that's a terrible thing, isn't it? What that means is a woman without discretion is no more beautiful than a pig. But a woman with discretion is what God wants and is the most beautiful. So we can look at the flip side of that, right? The desire of the righteous is only good, but the expectation of the wicked is wrath. A good man lives to please God. He wants goodness. He is searching for that. That's what he has set the bar for himself to achieve. Sinful men can only expect God's wrath. They're not looking for the goodness of God. They're not looking to please God. That's not something that's even on their radar. There is that scattereth and yet increaseth, and there is that withholdeth more than is meet, but it tendeth to poverty. When we read these verses, sometimes it helps to maybe read from like a New King James Version or something, but what he's saying here is you need to work for that, for what you need. You need to work for what you want, and you need to be generous to the needy. And don't withhold that. Don't withhold that. Brother Jim, you cannot outgive the Lord. That's exactly right. He will bless you when you give properly. In fact, in verse 25, he says, "The liberal soul shall be made fat, and he that watereth shall be watered also himself." 2 Corinthians chapters 8 and 9. Give, and God will give more. If you give, He'll give you more seed to work with. Right? That's the whole idea behind that. And I think that's something that we need to consider. But he that withholdeth corn, the people shall curse him, but blessing shall be upon the head of him that selleth. The one who is able but refuses to help the needy is known for that. And he's not going to be appreciated. The rich man. What do we know about the rich man and Lazarus? We know the rich man was able and he withheld. And God didn't appreciate it, and now we know what his ultimate ending is. He that diligently seeketh good procureth favor, but he that seeketh mischief, it shall come unto him. We reap what we sow. If we want to find trouble, it's out there. It's not hard to find trouble. It's not hard to get into trouble. But at the same time, it's not hard to find goodness and righteousness. It's not hard to live the way God wants us to live if we choose to do that. Now, does that mean we don't have to put forth effort? No, that's not what that means. But we can do it. Because in verse 27, he that diligently seeketh good procureth favor, but he that seeketh mischief, it shall come unto him. He that trusteth in his riches shall fall, but the righteous shall flourish as a branch. Lay up our treasures in heaven. Let's not trust in the things of this world because they are fleeting. They're not going to be here very long. He that troubleth his own house shall inherit the wind, but the fool shall be servant to the wise. How can you trouble your own house? We read about people who troubled their own house throughout the Old Testament particularly. David troubled his own house, didn't he? Absolutely. Solomon troubled his own house. Yep. Jeroboam is a good example of that. Now, since we're kind of talking about riches and some finances here, also we could add to that bad management of one's own house can cause trouble. If you have bad management financially, if you're not careful, you'll be working for the credit card company instead of working for your family. So that's something to consider. The fruit of the righteous is a tree of life. He that winneth souls is wise. That's the main goal. That's the purpose. And so that's what God wants. Daniel 12, 1 and 2. Daniel purposed in his heart that he was going to live a certain way, didn't he? Behold, the righteous shall be recompensed in the earth, much more the wicked and the sinner. If that kind of takes us back to the meek shall inherit the earth. Exactly what does that mean? Because it can't mean in eternity, because this earth's going to be destroyed. The righteous will live a better life in this world than the wicked, generally speaking. And these are general terms, general statements that are made. Are there certain evil people who have lived the worst you could possibly live, that it seems like everything they touch turned to gold? Well, sure, that happens. That happens. That's not the norm, but that happens. But generally speaking, the righteous and the godly live better in this world than the sinful. The sinful are going to have trouble with the law. The sinful are going to be, seems like they're up against it financially all the time. The sinful have problems in this life that the righteous are not necessarily going to have. Okay, that's the idea behind this. Any comments, questions? Brother Jim. Absolutely. And Brother Jim makes the point that particularly in the first century, those who suffered as Christians had a better life than those who were doing the persecuting. Rejoice. If you suffer as a Christian, rejoice because of that. Right? You know what's coming in the future. You know, Paul said, I'm caught in a strait. I want to go on and be with the Lord. I know that's better, but I know he knew he was needed in Corinth particularly, and so he didn't want to go on. He knew they needed him. And so, but he also knew how he was going to get to heaven too, or get to be with the Lord, didn't he? He knew that path, and that was a rough path. But ultimately, that's the path he ended up being on. All right, chapter 12. Here is a wonderful verse, and if we could get more people to understand this, I think the world would probably be better off. Whosoever loveth instruction loveth knowledge, but he that hateth reproof is brutish. We learn, yes.
I'd like to note that the New King James says, he who hates correction is stupid.
Really? I like that. I like that.
Makes it more plainer.
Yes. You know, I think I put in your notes somewhere a statement that John Wayne is credited with saying, life is hard. It's much harder when you're stupid. And that's true. When you're foolish, I think is probably the better way to say that. But whoso loveth instruction loveth knowledge. We learn a lot from that one statement. Knowledge is gained through instruction. You have to get knowledge. Knowledge doesn't just happen. It doesn't happen through osmosis. You hold the book and all of a sudden you gain knowledge. Correction. Correction isn't usually enjoyable. Okay? Even if it's not corporal punishment. You know, we get to a certain age in life, we still are corrected, but it's not corporal correction. That doesn't make it enjoyable, right? On the job, when we're grown, you know, sometimes we have to be corrected. No one enjoys being wrong, but it helps us when we accept the idea that I'm doing something wrong and now I'm going to correct that. But he that hateth reproof is brutish. That means unwilling. like an animal. Like an animal, okay? You try to help an animal, and do they understand that you're trying to help them? They'll bite you. You know, your dog will bite you. You try to give your dog a shot. You try to clip your dog's toenails. You got to put a muzzle on her, and she still tries to bite you as you're trying to put the muzzle on her. You know, because she's an animal. She's a brute. She doesn't have that knowledge, that understanding that people have. We don't want to act like the people, like those in the animal world, like animals. Okay, animals are just animals. They don't have an inner person. They don't have a soul. When they die, it's over for them. We want to have knowledge and understanding, and we want to love wisdom. A good man obtaineth favor of the Lord, but a man of wicked devices will he condemn. Righteousness generally is favored by the world. You know, generally speaking, a righteous person is favored by the world. And certainly is favored, respected by God. But when we look at even those who reject the Bible, would they rather live next door to a Christian, or would they rather live next door to someone who is a criminal and hates God and thinks you can do anything you want to, and your stuff is my stuff, and you know, whatever goes, the strong survive? Well, no, they'd want to live next door to a Christian, those who obey and live by righteousness. And so even if they don't want any part of it themselves, they still understand that's what's good for society. A man shall not be established by wickedness, but the root of the righteous shall not be moved. You know, the wicked just do whatever they want to do. And the righteous, they have set boundaries on themselves. And where do these boundaries come from? Come from God's Word. What is the basis for most of the laws that we abide by in our nation? Based on God's Word. And so people understand that. A virtuous woman is a crown to her husband. That means she beautifies her husband. But she that maketh ashamed is a rottenness in his bones. She's a detriment. She's a detriment. But a virtuous woman, again, we go back to Proverbs 31, beautifies her husband, is a help. When we look in Genesis chapter 2, and we see the husband-wife union created for the first time, she's called a helpmeet. You know, a lot of people I've heard use the term helpmate. That's not the term. It's helpmeet. And the wife is a helpmeet. And I like to think of it this way. She helps the husband to meet his responsibilities that God has placed upon him. And without her, it's a tall order, boy, for him to be able to do that. The thoughts of the righteous are right, but the counsels of the wicked are deceit. The righteous provide good counsel. And, you know, again, I go back to Rehoboam and the counselors he chose. They were wicked, they were deceitful, and it didn't turn out the way he wanted, did it? He destroyed a nation of God's people because of his deceitfulness. And if he had listened to the older men, it would have been much better for him. Any comments, questions? Let me catch up where I am. I'm behind right here. All right. The words of the wicked are to lie in wait for blood, but the mouth of the upright shall deliver them. The wicked provide evil. The inner condition of a person is shown through his words and actions. Where does all action begin? In the heart. In the heart. as you think, so you are. And so we understand and we can see how a person is through his words and his actions, because that begins in the heart. Okay? You might say one thing or present yourself to try to be something, but you can just hide the true essence of what you are for so long. And that's what your true heart is. The wicked are overthrown and are not, but the house of the righteous shall stand. That's just a plain statement. The wicked is overthrown ultimately in the end. A man shall be commended according to his wisdom, but he that is of a perverse heart shall be despised. The wise are exalted, and the wicked are denounced. God has exalted the wise from the beginning of time, and He has denounced the wicked, and He always has. He that is despised and hath a servant is better than he that honoureth himself and lacketh bread. This is another verse tending toward the good work ethic, not to be lazy. The one that boasts about what great things he has, and he really doesn't have anything, but he's lacking bread, is worse off than the one who is despised by the world, but works, is doing what he's supposed to do. Does the world love the righteous, or does the world hate the righteous? The world doesn't appreciate the righteous. And so we have to understand that there are those who will honor themselves, but he's just boasting. That's not what God wants. He doesn't like the braggart or the boaster. He doesn't want people to do that. A righteous man regardeth the life of his beast, but the tender mercies of the wicked are cruel. The wicked person will be so wicked as to be cruel to even the animals that he uses in his everyday work. And again, this was an agricultural society, and they would be cruel to the beasts that they work, but the tender mercies of the wicked are cruel. They are merciless, and the righteous are not that way. The righteous are not that way. He that tilleth his land shall be satisfied with bread, but he that followeth vain persons is void of understanding. The lazy person who hangs around other lazy people isn't going to do any kind of work. And if we notice, Solomon talks a lot about money. He talks about a lot about the work ethic. He talks a lot about the way that wives and women ought to behave. He talks a lot about, in general, the way we all ought to behave. And so he focuses in on a lot of these things. He talks a lot about foolish children being a worry and a shame to parents who tried to rear them properly. The wicked desireth the net of evil men, but the root of the righteous yielded fruit. The wicked desire the net of evil men. They want to catch anything they can catch and get as much evil that they can get. And that's the idea that Solomon is putting out here, but the root of the righteous yield fruit. And it's just a contrast here of what he's talking about. The wicked is snared by the transgression of his lips, but the just shall come out of trouble. How would you have a transgression of the lips? The wicked is snared by the transgression of your lips. You're probably telling a lie. Yeah. Yeah. Don't be telling lies, but the just shall come out of trouble. The truth, honesty is the best policy. A man shall be satisfied with good by the fruit of his mouth, and the recompense of a man's hand shall be rendered unto him. The previous verses spoke of the evil brought about by the wrongful use of the lips, and 14 here talks about the blessings gained by the proper use of words. No one serves God without gracious benefits, okay? And no one disobeys Him without being recompensed for that. And so that's something that we have to understand. And if the world understood that, they would be better for it. The way of the fool is right in his own eyes, but he that hearkeneth unto counsel is wise. A fool's wrath is presently known, but a prudent man covereth shame. If you do not believe that the fool is right when he tells you he's right, just ask him. And he will assure you that he is telling you what you need to know. If you talk to him about anything and you try to correct him, you will always be his enemy. That's the mindset of the fool. Okay? Solomon does a lot of teaching here in the negative. Okay? He shows us how the fool behaves, so we're to look at that and say, okay, I don't want to be that way. If I'm corrected, I want to accept that correction and change that part of me. He that speaketh truth showeth forth righteousness, but a false witness is deceit. One of the 6 things, yea, 7 are an abomination, those things that God hates. One of those was a false witness. What is the capability of a false witness? What can a false witness do? Can get somebody killed. It certainly can. And God hates deceit and hates a false witness. And so He is certainly against that. When we look in verse 18, there is that speaketh like the piercings of a sword, but the tongue of the wise is health. The tongue is sharp. And we see that here in Proverbs. We see it in James. The tongue is sharp. Here he calls it a sword. And the wise, though, will encourage instead of using the tongue as a weapon. And here's something we need to understand as Christians and as people who defend the faith. Even when we have to stand for that which is right, how are we supposed to do it? In love. We stick to the truth. We do it honestly. But you speak the truth in love. That's what Paul told the Ephesians. You know, you don't tell someone how stupid they are and how sorry and wrong they are. They may be wrong. Hey, they may be, by all accounts, they might be sorry. I don't know. But is that how you win a person to Christ? No. 1,000 times no. You speak the truth in love. Now, if a person is offended because of the truth, we can't help that. But if they're offended by the way we present the truth, now we need to work on that. Okay? We need to work on that. The lip of truth shall be established forever, but a lying tongue is but for a moment. The truth is enduring because it is the truth. A lie will eventually be exposed. Now, it may be too late for the person about whom the lie was told, but it will eventually be exposed. And God knows, and that's what matters. So even if someone has had a lie told about them, we are still to behave as Christians are supposed to behave. We're not to try to recompense evil for evil. Deceit is in the heart of them that imagine evil, but to the counselors of peace is joy. There shall no evil happen to the just, but the wicked shall be filled with mischief. Lying lips are an abomination to the Lord, but they that deal truly are His delight. Okay, so all of those verses right there fall right in line with the deceitfulness and the lying. And when he talks about no evil thing shall happen to the just, but the wicked shall be filled with mischief, what does that intend? Do bad things ever happen to good people in this life? Absolutely. So he must be talking about something else. He must be talking about something else. Shall no evil thing happen to the just? He must be talking about in eternity. Now, on occasion, in certain situations, the truth will prevail. Sometimes it doesn't. but the truth will prevail, and because of that, no evil thing will happen to you. But ultimately, no evil thing will happen to you in eternity. A prudent man concealeth knowledge, but the heart of fools proclaimeth foolishness. Again, verse 23 goes back to this idea of, do you always have to make a statement? No, you do not always have to make a statement. Jesus told the apostles to withhold certain truths. They weren't, it wasn't time to talk about it. He withheld certain knowledge to the apostles. They weren't ready for it. Okay? Again, he stood before Herod. He didn't speak a word. We do not always have to make a statement. But the heart of fools proclaimeth foolishness. They start talking and you can't close the gates. And the more they talk, the more you realize you're dealing with a foolish person. And they are, what's the saying? Keep your mouth closed and be thought a fool than to open your mouth and confirm that you are one. And so, that's the truth. And that's what Solomon's talking about here. The hand of the diligent shall bear rule, but the slothful shall be under tribute. Heaviness in the heart of man maketh it stoop, but a good word maketh it glad. The righteous is more excellent than his neighbor, but the way of the wicked seduceth them. The slothful man roasteth not that which he took in hunting, but the substance of a diligent man is precious. In the way of righteousness is life, and in the pathway thereof there is no death. I'm getting tired. The hand of the diligent shall bear rule, the slothful shall be under tribute. So again, he's talking about having a work ethic and not being lazy. If you are not willing to work, you will be under tribute to people, or to someone. You're always going to owe the company store, in essence, right? That's going to be the idea here. But the hand of the diligent shall bear rule. The one who's working hard and getting ahead, he's going to be in control. Heaviness in the heart of a man maketh it stoop, but a good word maketh it glad. Sometimes that's all it takes is a cheerful word from someone to another person, and it just makes their day. It brightens them up. But at the same time, and this goes back to verse 18, the tongue can be a sword. It can slice you and dice you up. Okay? And so we want to be careful with that. The slothful man roasteth not the wicked, that which he took in hunting, but the substance of a diligent man is precious. The lazy man will go hunting, and he is so lazy he will not even prepare that which he has gotten on the hunt. He'll just let it go to waste. Because it takes effort, right? We have any hunters in here? Used to hunt? Or do hunt? I used to hunt quite a bit. And the hunting part is the easy part. Right? The hunting part, the bagging the game is the easy part. Preparing the game is the hard part. But if you're going to do one, you must do the other. If you're going to be ethical in your hunting. And so, have you ever been out in the woods and walked up on a kill that someone just left? I've done that. That's not ethical. That's not right. God doesn't appreciate that. I don't think that a dumb animal has a higher standing than a human being, but we're not to be cruel to animals. We're not to just kill an animal for the sake of killing an animal. God created that creature. We're to use them for our benefit. We have dominion over the animal life of this world, but we are to take care of those animals. And if they're being mistreated just for the sake of mistreating them, God doesn't appreciate that. And so that's what the lazy person does. In the way of righteousness is life, and in the pathway thereof there is no death. If you're going to be righteous and walk the righteous path, that road leads to heaven. That's a promise. That's a guarantee. And so now all we have to do is get on that road and make sure we stay on it and get to where we want to go. Any comments, questions? All right. Chapter 13. Children, Huh? I'm about as fast as I can go and cover the material anyway. Man, where are we at? Well, we got about 5 minutes here. Let's see what we can do. Let's look at the first 10 verses. A wise son heareth his father's instruction, but a scorner heareth not rebuke. A man shall eat good by the fruit of his mouth, but the soul of the transgressor shall eat violence. He that keepeth his mouth keepeth his life, but he that openeth wide his lips shall have destruction. The soul of the sluggard desireth and hath nothing, but the soul of the diligent shall be made fat. A righteous man hateth lying, but a wicked man is loathsome and cometh to shame. Righteousness keepeth him that is upright in the way, but wickedness overthroweth the sinner. There is that maketh himself rich, yet hath nothing. There is that maketh himself poor, yet hath great riches. That's a tough verse, number 7. The ransom of a man's life are his riches, but the poor heareth not rebuke. The light of the righteous rejoiceth, but the lamp of the wicked shall be put out. Only by pride cometh contention, but with the well advised is wisdom. The son who has some degree of wisdom will hear and learn from the correction of his father. And why is that? Why do you think that is? He's been correcting him all along, and he's been instructing him, and he's been listening. And so he's gained some degree of understanding, depending on where he is at in life. And so he will listen. And when we look at Jesus, he is the perfect example of that. My article for this week is about Jesus and when his growing and maturing as a person. He's the perfect example in that. Of course, he's a perfect example in everything, but Luke 2:51 through 52, he grew in wisdom and knowledge, both with who? Who did he grow in wisdom and knowledge with? With God and man, right? He grew socially, he grew mentally, he grew emotionally, he grew physically, he grew in every way that we grow. And so he's a perfect example. He was the perfect son. He was the perfect son to the Heavenly Father. He was the perfect son to his earthly parents. And so he was very pleasing in that aspect. Of course, the opposite of the wise son is a scornful son. He rejects the instruction. He doesn't want to hear it. He's not going to grow. He's not going to get better. The faithful child of God will speak good words, which are a source of blessing to himself and to others. See, that's one thing we have to understand. We want to be a blessing to other folks as well. And again, in this idea is we reap what we sow. Verse 3 expresses this similar thought. He that keepeth his mouth keepeth his life, and he that openeth wide his lips shall have destruction. One who selects and controls himself and chooses righteousness, he's going to preserve his life. But the one who exercises improper control, he's going to have destruction in whatever avenue of life you go. Verse 4 here makes the distinction between the sluggard and the diligent. Again, obviously we've covered that pretty well. You need, laziness is not acceptable. The righteous man will not only lie, but he will not only not lie, but he also hates lying. When you go to the military academy at West Point, one of their rules is they do not lie. They do not tolerate those who do lie. And so if you find out your fellow student is lying and you do not let someone know, that fellow is going to be booted out of the military academy, and you are too, because you're not to tolerate lying. In contrast to that, the ungodly participates in lying. He's loathsome, and he will come to shame. Verse 17 is that one I said is difficult. Let's read that again quickly. We just have a couple minutes. There is that maketh himself rich, yet hath nothing. There is that maketh himself poor, yet hath great riches. This phrase, maketh himself, can mean to pretend. So I've put this information in your notes here, but what I think the favored meaning is, and I looked in a lot of different places, and as I read it, it's what just the initial reading to me seemed to be, is that people feign wealth while being poor and vice versa. There are people that do that. Obviously, they'll feign wealth when they're poor, and there are people who are very wealthy who will feign not having money. And there are reasons for that, obviously. But the proverb of verses 8 and 9 rebukes discontent with our lot in life, whether it's a life of riches or poverty. And Solomon here seeks to strike a balance between the two. A man's riches may be the ransom of his life. The extortion of money may prompt false accusation, and riches may be a ransom cheerfully paid, or they might be a price of deliverance from his enemies. So that's kind of what he's getting at. And when we look at the life of Abraham and Isaac, if either one of them had not been as wealthy as they had have been, would they have had the trouble out of their neighbors they had? They wouldn't have had the problems out of their neighbors they had if they'd just been poor old wanderers out there in the desert. But because they were wealthy, they had problems out of their neighbors. And the value of the light of the righteous person is beyond our knowledge. Who can estimate the worth of the influence of a righteous person beyond this life? Someone influenced every one of us to become Christians. We still talk about Abel, don't we? Righteous Abel. We still talk about him because his blood crieth out from the ground. Verse 10 doesn't say contention only comes by pride, but rather strife can always be traced to pride. And usually that's the case because someone doesn't want to give up. Someone doesn't want to give in. And that's a problem. We'll stop right here for a second, for a break. We'll come back and finish it up.